We know there is a general election coming. We know there's one coming. The question, of course, everyone is always asking, and, you see, I could almost do an entire video about speculations when and the reasons why that is going to be. But to be honest, it sort of doesn't matter because you are, as they say, crystal ball gazing, and it is sort of hard to predict that because you've got to sort of know what's going on inside Rishi Sunak's brain. And to be honest, today we are sort of going to get close to that, or at least as close as possible to sort of peering into Sunak's mind, because we are going to have a look at what Conservative Home thinks is going to be the prediction of a potential general election. And they think, or at least according to Will here for his piece, thinks that a summer election could very, very well be the best chance for Sunak to try and avoid a, quote, wipeout. But here's the thing, and we will be saying this throughout all the rest of this video. Conservatives have lost. The question is, or what we will find out, of the morning after the general election, is how big that loss was. That's the question we know that really matters. We know the Conservatives have lost. The question now just becomes, by how big do they lose? Because there are a lot of polls out there saying a lot of crazy things. I've seen one that says it would leave them with 4 seats. I've seen one that said that they might maybe retain something like 180, 190, maybe even 200 optimistically. So it is a vast range. But as I've said before, I think the range could be anything from, between 80 at the lowest end to maybe 120. Now, if it's lower than that, absolutely amazing. Getting them below that 100 seat result would be amazing. But of course, the less seats they win, the better it is. The more they panic, the more they infight. And oh boy, is that going to be fun. Because remember, to be party leader, you have to be an MP. And the question then becomes, who's left? Who is left after the desolation? Who's left? And oh boy, that leadership contest could be wacky, readers. It could be absolutely wacky. So, before we do getting into this, and at least the predictions of what we are going to be seeing here of a potential summer election, brought to us by Will, let's remember to click on the like, the share button, and of course the subscribe button if you are new. Down below, you can support the channel by clicking the check out the Patreon page. There's the Buy Me Coffee link where you can buy me coffee. There's the YouTube thank you button, and of course there's the Pony Club down below as well. And of course, remember, if you are a member of the Patreon page of the Pony Club, we do a weekly video for you guys. So do go check those out. We are almost coming up to the magical 100 number. So please do let me know, Pony Clubbers, Patreon people, like ideas, something you would like to see for like a 100 episode something. Maybe we'll do a live stream especially for you guys. I don't know. We'll see what happens when we reach that magic number, but we'll do something probably a bit special. I just don't know what we'll do but again, ideas more than welcome. So let's crack on into this then, shall we? So over we go to Conservative Home. The title of A Summer Election May Be Sunak's Only Hope of Avoiding a Wipeout. Here's the thing. It's going to be a wipeout anyway. It's just how much of a wipeout. You are already seeing people, and the polls have said time and time again, this could be a bigger loss for them than 1997. And a lot of polls are predicting that. So this is going to be bad. We could see many, many a Portillo moment happen during this particular general election. So let's get into this then. So, an underrated factor in deciding when the general election is held is whether Isaac Levdo, remember that's the big uh, conservative election guru that they like to hire, is being paid by the month. And if the polls are right after the election, it might be a very, very long time before anyone is willing to hire the Aussie as their campaign chief. As such, he has every financial incentive to press Sunak to go to the country as late in the year as possible. And here's the thing, you don't know what scandals and all kinds of stuff could happen. Just because this Rwanda bill has passed, and we've talked about all the problems and how it's not going to work and how all this stuff is just complete nonsense. What happens when that starts hitting the paper? Just how bad the Rwanda bill is and how bad, you know, does Sunak really want to wait for that? The economy doesn't really seem to be going in the right direction either. What's Sunak doing about that? Oh, that's right. He's hiding under the table with, you know, and just crossing his fingers going, please, inflation, please go down. But there you go. So honestly, nothing is really going right for Rishi Sunak, even if he has passed his Rwanda bill. It doesn't really say, should we say, good things for him. So, nevertheless, one would hope that British democracy hangs on more than one Aidan Opland's employability. The Prime Minister's stock answer has always been that it is working assumption that an election will be in the second half of the year. We, quote, Westminster watchers have usually taken this to mean October and November, and the last possible date would be January the 28th of next year. Here's the thing. Will really should have been honest here and said November ain't going to do it, because that's when the US presidential elections are also going to take place, and you do not want to be clashing with those. So November out. If anything, it's going to be October. If you take Rishi Sunak at his word, it's going to be second half of the year. So the logic for an autumn election is obvious. The government trails Labour by at least 20 odd points. The Bank of England is not begun to cut interest rates. Waiting until October and November might see them fall from their 16-year high and provide time for Jeremy Hunt to squeeze in one last tax-cutting financial statement before voters go to the poll. One more national insurance cut with feeling. Here's the thing. Those budgets did not move the needle. Why on earth are you going, oh yeah, he can cut taxes one more time? Honestly, it's becoming like a Britney Spears song. Cut those taxes one more time. These polls are killing me. But yeah, nothing has worked, and we've heard from number 10 the absolute despair, the fact that they've done all this stuff and nothing has changed the polls. So waiting this long and then hoping somehow that the Bank of England does this, it's very, very wishful thinking. Also, what could also happen between October and November? All sorts of stuff could happen between now and then. Who knows what scandals and missteps and gaffes could be deployed between now and then. So the longer you wait, the worse it could get. There's this again. Will's putting forward the very optimistic idea that things could get better. I would say to Will that the reality is things have not only got worse, they've gone from bad to worse to worse to worse to worse. And you still have not yet hit rock bottom. When every single time something bad happens, you think, gee, that's the worst thing that could happen. And then along comes William Rack, So he continues, with the Rwanda scheme now up and running in the next 3 months, Sunak will also hope the summer will see a steady stream of deportations to Kilgary, sorry. And he hopes that finally might deliver on his promise to, quote, stop the boats. It won't. We've expressed many times why it will not work. Many, many, many a time. But there you go. Optimism runs high for Will. October's party conference could then become a pre-post rally to try and the mood boy by at least 6 more months of newspapers trying to pick apart Keir Starmer's shallow promises and tunnel vision. But here's the thing. We've got the announcement very recently about nationalisation of rail. What happened then when you get a manifesto? And that's where you get more detail in these promises. You know? Once again, there's this blind optimism that things could only get better somehow. And yet, what about the newspapers picking apart more and more about the fact that Sunak is not doing anything, that he is leading a zombie parliament to effectively do nothing? You know, there seems to be no thought about the other way that this could very obviously go, and has been going. So again, the logic seems sound enough. On a personal level, one also imagines that Sunak would like to stay at number 10 for as long as he can manage. He is currently hovers between Anthony Eden in the list of prime ministers by tenure. Pushing towards an autumn, of course, would overhaul Lord Avon and provide a few more months of getting to ride the prime ministerial plane and pretending to be important. Honestly, after next week, after local elections, all bets could be off. You could see Tories start screaming to say, let's just get this over with. And if not, let's get rid of you for someone who will just put us out of our misery once and for all. You know, honestly, this time next week, it could be all change, but we'll wait and see what happens. So, yet few signs this week have suggested that Sunak may not have ruled out a summer election after all. Of course, the hacks will treat every instance of the Prime Minister not categorically ruling out going to the polls in July as an excuse to suggest that he is considering to. But there have also been straws in the wind more than once to try and substantiate that that is an exasperated answer just to the press conference. Our deputy editor touched on this once yesterday, that Sunak's and Hunt's announcement of defence spending boost is now less than 2 months after they refused to cave into backbench pressure for the budget, raising eyebrows. It may be trying to curry favour with the Sunak skeptic MPs before the local elections shellacking. Or are the pair no longer planning a pre-election fiscal event instead? It was apparent from the moment the Chancellor started speaking on March the 6th that he was not delivering a pre-election budget, for one simple reason, that if it was depressingly very meagre. Leaving aside the merits of the OBR's fiscal straitjacket, Hunt's dad jokes and prolonged shifting of money from one pocket to another had nothing in the heat of the polls racing. Here's the thing. Will is forgetting that entire budget was designed to do exactly that, to try and change the polls. We heard just like the beginning of this week, number 10's despair about the fact that we've done all this stuff. We've given out budget cuts and everything and tax cuts, and it's not working. Why aren't the polls changing? You know? So that's exactly what that was. I think trying to sort of cast March the 6th as, oh, that budget wasn't anything special. No, it was entirely built up to be by Conservatives, by Rishi Sunak, by Jeremy Hunt, as meant to be something special. So the assumption has thus descended that we will be going through this rigmarole yet again at some point in the autumn, that the Treasury are now considering yet another national insurance cut, along with some blue sky thinking about rolling back stamp duty. Yet, the ONS figures released this week might have thrown the spanner into the best laid plans of the Chancellor of the Exchequer. The government borrowed over 120.7 billion in 2023 to 2024, and 6.6 billion more than the OBR had expected. This does not rule out further tax cuts in the autumn. Again, obsessed. Why are conservatives like always so obsessed with tax cuts? I don't get the obsession with them. The Chancellor could always pencil in and even have more unrealistic spending cuts for the 5 years now in the future, enabling to try and conjure up some more fiscal headroom. But it doesn't suggest he may not have the freedom he might have hoped for. So is it a straw in the wind? Just waiting another 6 months for the economy to improve has always been a fatal lucid plan. The national insurance cuts have done nothing to shift the polls the last 2 times they've been foisted upon ungrateful voters. So why should they do this now? Even if interest rates do begin to fall, voters are still a long way from feeling better off than they did 5 long years ago. Is the thing, Will. It's not just a matter of 5 years ago. Your government came to power really in the coalition of like 2012. And voters have very long memories. Politicians and other people like to forget that voters don't have long memories, but they do. They know that they have worse off. They know that this particular government has not been better. They have not improved things. They've only made things actively worse. Indeed, the big Brexit vote promised by your party was meant to be a big moment of change that would bring national renewal, that once we've done Brexit, things are going to get so much infinitely better. And yet, as we have said all this time about this, the Brexiteers oversold Brexit. And now they cannot deliver on a micro crumb of what was promised back then. We saw recently on Sky News that you had this young woman who like runs her own business on TikTok. She said herself, Brexit promised all these things and yet it hasn't delivered on that. And people have sort of lost faith. And the Brexiteers do have a lot to answer for in that regard. But unfortunately, it has affected politics wider as a whole, which is, trust me, incredibly frustrating. But there you go. So, moreover, Sunak's waiting longer can allow his position to deteriorate further. Number 10 hopes that flights taking off to Rwanda at some point this summer might be a big political moment, providing their seriousness on illegal immigration. But as I've explained, the idea that the boats are going to be stopped by a few dozen illegals being taken to a Ryanair to Calgary for the birds is complete dud. Yet, even everyone knows just how bad this scheme is going to be. And it's actually quite refreshing that even Will here, yeah, this scheme is a dud. It's more than a dud. It's it's just a non-starter. It was thrown in to try and say, we're doing something about illegal immigration. The thing is, as we've said many, many times before, if you want to actually solve this problem, fix the asylum system, start funding safe routes, set up a processing center in France, which France has said many, well, not many times, but just a couple of months ago even, but as we said repeatedly, offered on a number of occasions, you can set up a processing center. If you pay for it, we'll build it, you staff it. That would actually be a big step forward. But of course, they can't because, then somehow that's seen as being soft on, on migrants at that point. Like, look, if people are going to come to this country and want to come to this country, then set it up so that they can do that. So it's easy for them to sort of do so, to get here, to put them through into the system so that then they go through it, so that we know who is here, So then that's how you drastically cut off, illegal migration, by providing those routes. Then you just get migration. But of course, even then, they don't like that. And you have sort of seen some Tory commentators talking about how legal migration now needs to be cut as well. That is something that they've tried to start to shift to. We'll see how much they shift forward on that possibly soon. But here we are. So, as the number of small boats now arriving surges towards record levels, even as a token flights start to take off, Sunak's strategy will have been revealed as utterly threadbare. The political capital of 2 whole years will have been spaffed, raising the stance on the issue on which Sunak cannot and will not deliver. We could even begin days until the poll puts us third behind Reform UK. And oh boy, if that happened, if you started to get like a couple of polls that put them in third place behind Reform UK, oh boy, would that be fun. So, in such a climate, speculation about Sunak's position will only grow louder. I've also raised this prospect of letters going into Graham Bradley after the local elections, even if the threshold isn't met. The longer the Prime Minister waits to go to the country, the longer time available for the polls to sour even further, and for MPs to become jittery, even when the herd moves. These realities even stand if the local elections aren't the political equivalent of the Klubux Actoroid impact. And if Andy Street and Ben Houchen survive, if Suvan Hall does better than expected, and if the number of location of lost council seats is surprisingly uncatastrophic, Sunak could claim some form of momentum and then go to the country pig meat lipstick. That is very optimistic. I think really at the moment, one of those two could survive. I hope it's not Ben Houchen, personally. Like I say, I think there's a lot of stuff that we need to get rid of. And I think Ben Houchen's obviously one of them. Susan Hall had not just a car crash of an interview recently, she had an absolute train wreck. Like, Susan Hall is bad. Like, if you could pick a worse candidate to run, it would be Susan Hall. Ultimately, from what you can see at the polls, Sadiq Khan is going for a third term. And by the looks of it, these numbers do look to be, shall we say, very North Korean like if he does win. So, yeah, Susan Hall's location isn't going to be bad. The lost council seats are going to be very bad. Losing over 400 seats when you are trying to defend at least 900 something is not that particularly good. Under, quote, normal circumstances, you would probably be really looking to defend or at least keep the losses down to like 200 to 300. And that would be considered, quote, good for a normal government during normal times. But of course, we aren't in normal times. Things are a bit wacky at the moment. But there you go. We'll see what happens this time next week when reporting about what's happened. So, if the worst happens, he'll be doomed anyway, and may as well just give it a go on the Fortuna. Going earlier has also have the benefit of catching the opposition on the hop. Labour are already prepared. Labour have been prepared since late last year. Like, they are prepared to go to a general election more so than ever. Like, they are willing, they are ready to go on this front. Nigel Farage hasn't made it his much mooted return to politics. Well, if there's a general election, oh, that could be very much back on. Will he add 4 points to reform numbers just alone? Labour are still not quite ready for an election, having not yet worked out what they want to do in office. That's not true. We just had some of the stuff very recently. We know there's, again, a policy working team who have already working stuff out, that they do have all those policies lined up and ready to go. Would not shock me, just as we heard yesterday about the announcement of rail nationalisation, that maybe Labour do sort of a slow trickle of this is what we are going to do in preparation for an election. That would not be surprising. So, back to it. So, when the public have obviously decided that the government is doomed, It can do very little to shift its fate. Just ask John Major or Gordon Brown. We're at the edge of an age, and it may be very upsetting, but voters are ready for Labour. The longer Sunak is seen to delay Starmer's arrival out of a mixture of timidity and vanity, the angrier the voters will become at his squatting, and things can always get worse. And yet, Will, you started off so optimistic, as I said. You started off so optimistic. So, having just booked my summer holiday, I have very little personal desire to spend the coming months covering an election whose outcome will only be grim. But the country deserves a government that wants to do something more than just battling out time. Sunak's best hope to avoid a wipeout may be thus calling a summer election and telling Levido to start updating his LinkedIn. So maybe we go for a summer election. But like I say, it all depends on local elections. I think it all depends on local elections next week. Be they bad, the worse they are, the worse they become. Like I say, please do, if you are in England, go out and let your people know. Go out and vote in these local elections. Like I say, the more people turn out, the better. Do remember your ID, etc., etc. Go out and vote, do all that good stuff, and hopefully we can really force an early general election if we turn out and we get people to vote. And they lose a lot of councillors. It will be bad news for them. And of course, finally, maybe a general election, which in itself could be pretty fun. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, let me know what you think down below in the comments. And of course, do remember to click the like and share button on your way out as well. And we'll see you all next time.